My name is Victor, and if you are also over 60 or approaching it, I want to speak to you plainly today, not as someone trying to sell you anything, and not as someone who will tell you what you want to hear. What I am going to share with you right now is something most people in your position will never be told, not by their financial advisors, not by the articles they read online, and certainly not by the people around them who are too polite or too uncomfortable to be honest. There are three habits, quiet habits, invisible habits, that are keeping a significant number of people our age from ever reaching the financial security they spent their entire lives building toward. These habits do not feel dangerous. That is precisely what makes them so destructive. They feel normal. They feel earned. They feel like wisdom. And that is exactly why they are so effective at draining the resources you have left. I have spent decades watching this pattern repeat itself. I have observed brilliant, hard-working people who did everything the conventional financial world told them to do, arrive at 60, 65, 70, and discover that what they thought was a solid foundation was in fact much thinner than they realized. Not because of catastrophic decisions, not because of market crashes they failed to anticipate, but because of quiet, daily, invisible habits that compounded against them in exactly the same way that good financial habits are supposed to compound in your favor. Compounding is a mechanism. It does not care whether it is working for you or against you. Let me start with the first habit. It is the one that is the most socially acceptable, the most emotionally justified, and the most quietly devastating. I call it earned comfort spending. And if you are honest with yourself, you will likely recognize it immediately. After 4 or 5 decades of disciplined work, of building, of sacrificing, of deferring gratification, most people reach their late 50s or early 60s with a deep and completely understandable sense of entitlement to comfort. Not luxury necessarily, just the right to stop saying no, the right to upgrade, the right to buy the better version of the thing, to take the nicer trip, to eat at the better restaurant without calculating the cost, to renovate the kitchen because you have looked at that kitchen for 25 years and you have earned the right to change it. There is nothing morally wrong with any of this. The problem is not the desire. The problem is the accounting. When people enter what I call the earned comfort phase, they stop tracking the cumulative cost of small upgrades. They stop measuring against the plan. Each individual decision feels reasonable, feels proportional, feels justified by a lifetime of effort. The new car that costs $12,000 more than the practical alternative, reasonable. The kitchen renovation that runs $40,000 over its original estimate. You only do this once. The annual travel budget that quietly doubles because you have finally decided to go first class. Because why not? You are not getting younger. Understandable. The subscriptions, the memberships, the upgraded services, the gifts for people you love that become progressively more generous because you can finally afford to be generous. None of these decisions, taken individually, will ruin anyone. But here is what the financial industry will not tell you, because it is not in their interest to tell you, and frankly, because most advisors do not themselves understand the full mechanics of what happens after 60. Every dollar you spend in your early 60s is not a dollar. It is $3, $4, $5, depending on your life expectancy and your investment returns. Because that dollar, if it remained working for you in a properly structured portfolio, would continue generating income for the next 20 to 30 years. When someone at 62 spends $40,000 on a kitchen renovation that they could have done for $25,000, they are not spending $15,000. They are spending, in real terms, between $45,000 and $60,000 of future security. The compounding that works against you in the form of inflation and taxes works just as powerfully against every unnecessary withdrawal from your accumulated capital. I knew a man, meticulous, careful, brilliant in his field, who retired at 63 with capital that should have lasted his lifetime comfortably. In the first 4 years of his retirement, in a genuine and justified celebration of everything he had built, he increased his monthly spending by roughly 40% compared to his working years. Not extravagantly, nothing conspicuous, just comfortably, as he put it. By 67, the projections for his portfolio had shifted dramatically, not because the markets failed him, because the habit of comfort spending had established itself as his new baseline, and baselines are extraordinarily difficult to revise downward once the mind accepts them as the new normal. The correction here is not austerity, it is awareness. Before you make any significant spending decision, and I mean any decision above a threshold you set for yourself, whether that is $5,000 or $10,000, run the real number, not the sticker price, the future value cost. Ask yourself what that capital would be worth in 10 years if it remained invested, in 15 years. The answer will not always stop you from spending, but it will give you honest information, which is the only basis on which any sound financial decision can be made. Now let us talk about the second habit. This one is so deeply embedded in conventional retirement wisdom that questioning it feels almost reckless. It is the psychological safety of cash, and after 60, it becomes one of the most reliably wealth-destroying forces that most people will ever encounter. Here is what happens. As people approach and enter retirement, a very natural and entirely human instinct takes over, the desire to protect what they have built. The appetite for volatility decreases. The idea of watching a portfolio drop 15 or 20% in a market correction becomes, psychologically and emotionally, almost intolerable in a way it never was during the accumulation years. During the accumulation years, a market drop is an inconvenience. After 60, it can feel like an existential threat. And so people do what feels safe. They move capital into cash, into savings accounts, into money market funds, into certificates of deposit, into what feels like a locked room where nothing bad can reach it. This instinct is not irrational. It comes from a completely legitimate place. The problem is that the logic is built on a misunderstanding of what risk actually means after 60. Most people define risk as the possibility of losing money in a market decline. That is one form of risk. But there is another form of risk, one that does not announce itself, one that does not show up as a red number on a brokerage statement, one that is invisible in the short term and catastrophic in the long term. That risk is the loss of purchasing power through inflation. Let me give you the mechanics of this clearly, because the financial media almost never presents it in terms that are actually useful. If you keep $1 million in a savings account or money market fund earning somewhere between 3 and 4% annually, and inflation, real, actual inflation as experienced by someone our age, accounting for healthcare costs, housing costs, food, and services, is running at 5 to 6% or higher, you are not preserving your wealth. You are losing it. Not dramatically, not visibly, but with absolute mathematical certainty. Every single year, the purchasing power of that $1 million is declining. In 10 years, depending on the inflation differential, you may have nominally the same amount, but be able to purchase significantly less with it. You are getting poorer. The number on your statement does not show this. Your lifestyle will. This is not a theoretical concern. For those of us over 60, the inflation rate that matters is not the headline CPI figure that governments report. It is the personal inflation rate that applies to our actual spending. Healthcare premiums, long-term care costs, prescription medications, home maintenance. The costs that dominate the budget of someone in their 60s and 70s have been inflating at rates that regularly and substantially exceed the general consumer price index. Keeping large amounts of capital in cash equivalent instruments in the name of safety is not a conservative strategy. It is a slow, polite, well-mannered way of becoming poorer. The proper response to this is not to abandon caution or to take on inappropriate risk. It is to redefine what risk means. A portfolio with appropriate diversification, one that includes assets that have historically provided real returns above inflation over extended periods, is not reckless at 65. A portfolio that sits entirely in cash while inflation quietly erodes its purchasing power is not safe. It is just slow. The sequence of losses matters enormously, and a good financial architect will help you structure income-producing assets in a way that provides the cash flow stability you need in the short term without sacrificing the growth necessary to protect you in the long term. But the first step is to stop treating the appearance of safety as the same thing as actual safety. They are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. I have watched people arrive at 75 having carefully protected, as they thought, everything they built, only to discover that what they protected was the number, not the value. The number looked healthy. The lifestyle it could support had quietly and visibly contracted. The money was there. The security it was supposed to represent had been slowly dismantled by inflation while they were not paying attention. That is not protection. That is a very expensive illusion. The third habit is in many ways the most psychologically complex, and it is the one I find most consistently present in the financial behavior of highly intelligent, accomplished people over 60. I call it the deferral habit, and it is not laziness. Let me be clear about that. The people most affected by this habit are in fact the opposite of lazy. They are thoughtful, careful, deliberate people who understand that financial decisions are important and who therefore take them seriously. The problem is that taking something seriously, in their framework, means waiting until the conditions are exactly right, until they have gathered enough information, until the uncertainty they are currently feeling has been resolved. The deferral habit is discipline that is curdled into paralysis. Here is how it manifests. Someone over 60 knows at some level that their current portfolio allocation is no longer well suited to their situation. They know that the mix of assets they built during the accumulation phase needs to be restructured for the distribution phase. They know that the estate planning documents they drafted 15 years ago are outdated and no longer reflect their actual wishes or their actual family situation. They know that they have been meaning to review the beneficiary designations on their retirement accounts, and that some of those designations may name people or circumstances that no longer make sense. They know that the life insurance policy they have been paying premiums on for decades may no longer serve any useful financial purpose. They know all of this, and they mean to address it. They have been meaning to address it for 2 years, or 3 years, or 5 years. There is always a reason to wait. The market is volatile right now. Better to address the portfolio when things settle down. There is a family situation that makes it a difficult time to have the estate planning conversation. The financial advisor they wanted to consult is not available until next quarter. The tax year is almost over, or just beginning, which makes it a bad time to make changes. The real estate market is uncertain, which means the decision about the second property needs to wait. Every one of these reasons is legitimate in isolation. Collectively, they form a wall between where the person is and where they need to be financially. And time, which is already the scarcest resource anyone over 60 possesses, continues to pass. The reason this habit is so insidious is that unlike the other 2 habits I have described, this one produces no visible negative consequence in the short term. Earned comfort spending shows up on bank statements. The inflation erosion of cash-heavy portfolios shows up, if you look carefully, in declining purchasing power over time. But the deferral habit is invisible until it is catastrophically visible. The estate that was never updated goes through a probate process that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and takes years. The portfolio that was never rebalanced sustains losses in a market event that a proper risk-appropriate structure would have substantially mitigated. The insurance policies that were never reviewed continue extracting premiums for coverage that serves no purpose. The beneficiary designations that were never corrected direct assets to the wrong people or create tax consequences that could have been entirely avoided with an afternoon of attention. I want to give you a framework for breaking this habit because the solution is simpler than most people expect. The deferral habit survives on the premise that a decision not yet made is a decision held in reserve, that the option to decide correctly still exists and will be exercised at some point in the future. That premise is false. A decision not made is itself a decision. It is the decision to continue with whatever the default is. And after 60, the default in most financial and estate planning matters is almost never in your favor. The default is set for the benefit of financial institutions, tax authorities, and legal processes, not for you and not for the people you want to protect. The correction is to treat financial architecture as a recurring obligation, not as a one-time project. Set a fixed schedule. Every 6 months, sit down with whoever helps you manage these matters and conduct a review, not a check-in, a review. Every document, every allocation, every designation, every insurance policy, every assumption built into your financial plan. If something needs to change it that day, not when the market settles, not after the family situation resolves, not next quarter. The cost of acting on imperfect information is almost always lower than the cost of waiting for perfect information that will never arrive. There is a deeper truth that connects all three of these habits, and I want to leave you with it because I think it is the most important thing I can say. All three of these habits, the earned comfort spending, the psychological refuge of cash, and the paralysis of perpetual deferral, share a common root. They are all responses to the same underlying reality, which is that after 60, the relationship with time changes fundamentally. During the accumulation years, time is an asset. Every year of disciplined saving and investing adds to what you are building. The future is an account that grows the longer you leave it alone. After 60, that dynamic inverts. Time is no longer an asset that works for you automatically. It is a resource that must be actively managed, because in its natural state, without deliberate intervention, it tends to work against the financial position of someone in the distribution phase. The comfort spending habit is a response to the feeling that the future is now, that the time for enjoyment is here before it disappears. The cash habit is a response to the fear that time is running out to recover from losses. The deferral habit is a response to the hope that time will provide better conditions for difficult decisions. All three are, at their core, about time. And all three are, at their core, mistaken in the same way. They treat time as something that can be managed emotionally, through spending, hoarding, or waiting, rather than something that must be managed strategically, through precise, informed, deliberately timed action. The people I have observed who have genuinely protected and grown their wealth after 60 all share one characteristic that distinguishes them from those who did not. They made a decision at some point to treat the management of their financial life after 60 as a different discipline than the management of their financial life before 60. They did not bring the habits of the accumulation years into the distribution years and expect them to work. They rebuilt their thinking. They asked different questions. They accepted that the financial conventional wisdom designed for people in their 30s and 40s does not map cleanly onto the realities of people in their 60s and 70s. And they acted on that understanding, consistently, without deferral, without the comfort of cash illusions, and without using earned reward as a justification for financial imprecision. That is the standard. It is not an easy one, but it is the only standard that actually protects what you have spent a lifetime building. And the time to begin meeting it is not when conditions improve. It is now, with the information you already have, in the circumstances you are already in. The quiet habits that have been working against you do not wait for a convenient moment to stop. Neither should you.